So often asked on the channel what equipment I use. I'm not really into all the top gear, but I do use this favourite lure rod. But for the sort of bass fishing that we're doing, particularly today, it's perfect. Top entry level rod, I suppose, or mid-range almost, and you can get these for under £100. I think Veals were the last to do them. And as for the reel, I do like these Shimano's. This is the Sedona, similar to the Exige. Always put braid on these. This is a 2500 size reel, and I find that perfect. The main reason I like these is the front drag on the Shimano's. Just so much easier to use one-handed. Imagine you're playing a fish and you want to adjust the drag. You can do that one-handed on that sort of design on the spool button. And even with the way I treat them, dunking them in the salt water occasionally, as long as you rinse them down afterwards, they do last a few seasons. I do occasionally use the Tronix Pro brand Axia, but my favourite fluorocarbon is actually quite a lot better. You're getting a 0.33mm on, well, as good as a 20-pound fluorocarbon. This Seagar is the one to go for, no problems with that, and I've landed this season the 7 and the 9-pounder with this. Again, another thing we've been asked recently is the knots between the leader and the braid. I used to always do an FG knot, but actually I find the uni knot to uni knot now is the way forwards. It's a slightly bigger knot than the FG, but it's so much easier to tie in the field when it's windy or your hands are cold, and it's kind of like the knot that you can tie well is going to be better than a better knot that you can't tie so well. So for me, this uni to uni, I use it all the time. And as I say, I've landed bigger fish with this, and it hasn't had a problem whatsoever. So really happy with the uni to uni, and I think I'll just use this from now on. Well, I'll leave a link for that and the FG knot. Just trim it off. You can put super glue on this as well, but I don't tend to. Ready to go. So I'm making a few mistakes on this session. You'll see as we work through today's session, making a few mistakes. The answer to where the fish were and what they were doing was pretty obvious, and I hope as you look through the video you'll pick up on it quicker than I did, because I change at the end to the method that catches the fish. So starting off, we've got the wind blowing from our right hand side here. So you can see here the wind's blowing right to left on this little rocky outcrop. What I want to be doing really is pushing into the wind. You can see how the waves are breaking off there. That's attractive to the bass, and that should hold the food and hold the bait fish if there are any there. As for the first lure, we were going to go for this mackerel looking lure. Reason I'm using these is I have seen the bass chasing the mackerel all week, so they may well be preoccupied with things that look like mackerels. Well, unfortunately, and as usual, the GoPro packed up. I had a couple of takes just as I brought the lure up to my feet, and actually that's a clue as to what the fish were doing and something I didn't pick up on. You'll see later the solution to that. But yeah, a couple of little hits just as I've come over the top of the rocks there. So I'm quite happy with this mackerel looking lure. I saw a couple of fish follow it right in as well. Only in about a foot of water. At this point also had a decent fish on as well, which I lost, and thanks GoPro, lost the footage from that as well. Swap over to the KOMOMO, slowly changing over to single hooks as well on these. Still I persevered. You figure out what the fish were doing and what I wasn't doing. Both those lures, by the way, were subsurface lures, and I was only getting the takes as I brought it to my feet. quite snaggy here. What do you do when you get a snag? Well, you should know how hard to pull. Try pulling from different angles. It's worth moving across the rocks. Of course, with these lures being so expensive, it's worth making an effort to get it back without snapping on the braid. So here's a little solution. I don't know, have you ever done this before? Got a length of braid there. I've snapped it off. I'm just going to wrap it around the rock. Length of braid there. I'm just going to wrap it round the rock here. Sort of tie it round, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And all I'm going to do with that rock, just chuck it down. It's quite a remote location here, so I'm not in danger of tripping anyone up with it. I'll make a note of where I've left it, and we'll come back at the end of the session, and hopefully on the end of that will be the snagged lure. Certainly going to save us 20 odd quid. Well, still I thrashing away. Have you figured out what I should have done yet? Do live sticks. Because we were getting quite a lot of snags there. The advantage of these, of course, is that they're fish weedless. You tuck the tip of the hook into the recess of the lure, and a bass will hit them so hard you can actually dig the tip of the hook in to the bit of the lure, and I don't think it matters. Always worth checking as well. Condition of the fluorocarbon can cut up quite easily. Something like that will lead to a missed fish, wouldn't it? Even if you retrieve them at a slow speed, they tend to float to the surface, and they're used like a subsurface lure. But the best way is to really let them sink down and bounce across the bottom, and have that real natural action to them. You can fish it through the weed as well. They work really well. Sort of slow, not particularly deliberate with how I retrieve these, just trying to feel it through the rod tip and the length of fluorocarbon, just to feel what that's doing. You should be able to pick up on individual rocks and bumps as you cast. You can even cast them onto rocks and let the wave take them off and into the feeding zones for the bass. Very unlikely to get snagged, these ones. Sometimes I just stop. You see how I'm only just sort of touching the reel handle there. A lot of the work here is through the rod tip. Doesn't take much to get that tail moving on the lure. So a little bit frustrating that first part of the session, and I still hadn't realised what was going on, which I'm sure you're probably picking up on by now. More plastic to take home. Sometimes worth taking a bin bag with you. Some places you can almost fill it with stuff. Well, this was the solution. Again, the problems with this GoPro footage, but I had 4 off the surface, and the fish were feeding right off the surface, and I just didn't try a surface lure early doors. And I've always said, I'll try Chenko first sort of few casts just to see where the fish are. I didn't do that today, and that's what they were doing. So we had 2 fish, one here you can see, the other one not filmed, and the other 2 were lost, smashed it off the surface or lost halfway through. So yeah, definitely the solution to today's fishing was the surface lures. Now one thing I really want to film is a fish taking that off the surface for you. Almost got it today, keeps me coming back. So yeah, bass off the surface has got to be the way to go. Today's So the answer to today's dilemma, this is what we wanted, a top water lure. I've seen it smash it 2 or 3 times. I've just tied the braid on for now. I usually use fluorocarbon, as you know. But that was it, today's winner. Thanks very much for watching. Easy. It was just sat on the rock. Yeah, I think it's probably snagged on the rock, and then the tide's done this rest of the damage. Great though, saved me 30.